Dinosaurs by Tom Franklin. On the day he saw the rhinoceros, Stedman woke an hour before dawn. In the living room, in the dark, he stared at the fish tank for so long as coffee grew cold. Something, the end of a dream maybe, it nagged him and left him uncertain and pensive. The house seemed too small, so he loaded his equipment and he left early. Soon the knobby buckshot tires of his truck were humming comfortably along the interstate. Mobile was behind him, Montgomery far ahead. The gas station signs at every exit, colorful smudges in the fog. He drove a company pickup, a big silver Ford F-250 with four-wheel drive he rarely had to use. On the back glass he'd attached a Greenpeace decal. He knew the gas-guzzling truck and the sticker contradicted each other, but Stedman had been at odds with himself lately, a bit distracted. He nearly missed his exit, for example, and had to jab his brakes and swerve, and soon he found himself on a quiet, unfamiliar two-lane with the 8 o'clock sun hazy over the trees. Where had the miles gone? Lines of barbed wire and red-tailed hawks on fence posts, cattle licking dark salt blocks. Occasionally, he'd pass a rusty harrow, kudzu climbing its spikes, and think of his father, a retired geologist who lived refurbishing antique tractors. Now, in a nursing home, he called Stedman more and more, but he remembered him less and less. Kilpatrick's Sinclair Station was a flat, gray cinder block lump with a shed against the back and a faded green sign. Beside two antique gas pumps stood the rhinoceros, giant head lowered, right foot lifted as if it were pawing the ground. Its purpose, Stedman guessed, was to attract customers, but from the looks of this dump, the rhino might soon be out of a job. Like you, pal, Stedman thought, watching old Kilpatrick suck on his unfiltered Camel and glower through the drugstore reading glasses at the paperwork Stedman had spread across the office desk. Above them, also glowering, was a dusty crow nailed to a piece of driftwood. "Well, get to it," the old man said. "I ain't got all day." Even his breath smelled like gasoline. "Your underground tanks," Stedman began, "where you store your fuel? I know what they are." Stedman unfolded a pamphlet that explained corrosion in simple terms. "Did you know they've probably been leaking for years?" Kilpatrick stubbed out a cigarette in a clamshell ashtray. He lit another and smoked while Stedman gave his usual pitch, how the storage tanks needed a leak detection system, or according to federal regulations, there'd be no choice but to shut down the station. At best, if the tanks were secure, leak detection wells could be installed for around $1,000. At worst, Kilpatrick's tanks would have to be excavated and replaced with the new EPA-approved above-ground units, a cost of several $1,000s. When Stedman finished, there was a long silence, which he finally broke with his usual remark about doing good for the environment. "The environment?" Kilpatrick snatched off his glasses. "Take you a good look out the window yonder at the environment." Stedman gathered his papers politely and closed his briefcase. Outside the hot white sky and the two-lane blacktop, the distant pine trees, no house or building in sight, just the rhinoceros baking in the sun. When Stedman returned 2 days later, he always gave customers time to check his background. Kilpatrick was smoking and leaning against the rhinoceros with his arms folded. He wore baggy coveralls black with oil. What he would do first, Stedman explained, unloading his hand auger, was dig holes around the underground tanks for soil samples. "I'll go down a few feet," he said, "and that's where we'll find your contamination." The auger, stainless steel, extendable to 12 feet, was warm from the sunlight. Kilpatrick squinted at the corkscrew blades. "You plan to dig with that thing? By hand?" Stedman shouldered the auger. "You want to show me where your tanks are buried?" Kilpatrick nodded toward the right side yard of the station and then limped over the concrete and went into the glassed office and eased himself into a folding chair. Stedman watched him open the Coke machine and fan the cool air into his collar, and then draw a Budweiser from the rack and pry off the lid with a bottle opener from his coveralls pocket. Round the building was a jungle of grass, bitterweed and briars, out of which stuck two 4-inch diameter pipes with padlock caps, the ports used for measuring and filling the underground tanks. Stedman leaned the auger against the wall, walked over and gave each pipe a solid kick. He knelt and he sniffed them, and then took hold of the left one and started working it back and forth. After a minute he had the pipe wiggling, and soon it came out of the dirt in his hands, a foot-long length not connected to anything. He tossed it in the air and caught it. Kilpatrick wasn't the first station owner to pull something like this. They'd do anything to knock him off the scent, and their bullshit usually helps subdue his guilt at closing them down. Stedman dropped the pipe, collected the auger, and walked behind the building past the rusty trailer and the rickety shed. The dirt back here was stained with oil. Kilpatrick could be fined if Stedman chose to report him. Greasy shapes lay scattered about, transmission housings caked with grime, torque converters, leaky oil filters, and stacks of cracked car batteries. There was an old bathtub full of greenish water and an anvil with a dog skull on it. On the other side of the station, Stedman kicked away a milk crate to reveal two rusty ports, the real ones, locked with combination locks. He chose a spot a few feet east and took hold of the auger's T-shaped handle, and he began twisting. The ground was hard and rocky, but Stedman's arms were hard, his skin brown from digging hundreds of holes through the miles of gravel in the hot sun. Hell, with the gas-powered jackhammer in his toolbox, not even concrete would stop him. His smart-ass co-workers called him the Lust, Leaky Underground Storage Tanks Man. Stedman couldn't imagine a less suited acronym. He found nothing lusty about gasoline contaminating the groundwater, and he hadn't lusted for anybody or anything in a long, long time. He'd been given this nomadic grunt work as punishment for his behavior on his last project at the civil engineering firm which specialized in hazardous waste cleanup. He'd been head geologist in the remediation of a large chemical plant. On his first day, he learned that for years the plant had been dumping blood-red chemical byproducts into the Alabama River. Now, this was no surprise, but what pissed him off was that each morning 2 clueless black workers without safety gear had been sent out in a motorboat to net the dead fish floating on the surface. Stedman, before several laborers restrained him, had nearly shoved the plant engineer into the river. He was 3 feet into his 4th hole, the dry dirt growing softer farther down, when the cellular phone in his truck chirped. "Happy birthday to me," his father's dry voice sang off-key. After 2 choruses, Stedman interrupted him. "It's not your birthday yet." "Hell, I know that, boy. It's tomorrow." "Try December," Stedman said. 5 more months. "Well, knock off the bull crap and give me a hint, Squirt." Stedman sat on the tailgate remembering that 2 days ago had been his mother's birthday. She'd been dead 6 years, and this wasn't the first year he'd forgotten. "Dad," he said, "are you okay? Do the nurses know you're on the phone?" "Ah, to hell with them. It's not their 50th. It's not yours either," Stedman thought. His father was 78. This was the first year in the home. "Bigger than a shoebox, I hope," his father said. "What is?" "My present. That goddamn dog you gave me last year must have run off." The dog was a black lab, a gift from Stedman's mother, had died of old age a decade ago. Stedman moved the phone to his other ear. He recalled that on trips into the country, his father had always picked up hitchhikers, but made them ride in the back of the truck with the dog. "Dad," Stedman said, "now listen, I've got one for you. Crows." Easy. A murder. This was a childhood road game. His father used to name an animal, and Stedman was supposed to give its group's title. An army of frogs, a parliament of owls, like that. Turtles, Stedman said. Let's see. His father would do this all day, like a dog who never tired of fetching. A bale. How about... Stedman looked over by the gas pumps. Rhinoceroses. A pause, and Stedman pictured his father, who still wore the safety glasses required by his last job. He'd be standing at the payphone in his blue jumpsuit, right hand tapping his ample belly, probably wearing his steel-toe work shoes, too. A pride, he said. A pride of rhinos? Behind Stedman, a door slammed, and Kilpatrick came limping around the building carrying his folding chair and a six-pack. He suddenly looked smaller. Stedman stood up. Dad, I'm going to call you later. Kilpatrick opened the chair and sat in the narrow strip of shade the building offered and watched and drank as Stedman resumed digging, twisting the auger deeper into the ground. He thought he could smell gas already. Regular divining rod, ain't you? Kilpatrick said, crossing his legs. He didn't have socks, which bothered Stedman, like the smelly bastard was on vacation. I do declare, he said, you plumb determined to shut me down, ain't you? Stedman wiped the sweat from his eyes. You know what? If you want the truth, I'd rather not. The hell, Kilpatrick said. You so goddamn eager to ruin a fellow's living, you'll find some gas in the ground if you have to pump it in there your own damn self. That'll be my last sale, he said to the sky. 3 gallons for this here smart aleck to pour in the dirt. You trot on over here, Stedman said. Stick your snout in this hole and see what you smell. Kilpatrick stubbed out his half-smoked cigarette and put it behind his ear. Stedman stepped aside and rubbed his biceps as the old man came over and squatted. He steadied himself on the auger handle, which stood upright like a detonator. He made a loud sniffing noise. What do you smell there? Stedman asked. Not a thing. How about that? Stedman stooped beside Kilpatrick. I declare if I don't smell gas. Well, shit, Kilpatrick said, and he belched. You smell what you want to smell. If you were lonely enough, you'd smell a girl down in that hole. I don't guess you'd strike your lighter and hold it there, Stedman said, taking the old man's elbow to help him up. Kilpatrick yanked his arm away. Got me a boy, he said. Played ball for Auburn. If he was here today, he'd knock your dick in the dirt, and we'd let that goddamn handle there be your grave marker. He stalked off, stopping to collect his chair and his beer. The hole Stedman had been digging was 4 inches across and 3 feet deep. The goods. That's what his father had called the petroleum deposits that he'd found. Stedman knelt and took a handful of soil and let it fall through his fingers. He longed to touch something undeveloped and uncontaminated. His father used to come home excited about a pocket of crude they'd hit. He would kiss Mom on the lips and then scoop her and Stedman into his lap and tell them how the dinosaurs had died mysteriously, how after millions of years fermenting in the earth, they had become oil. As he fell asleep those nights, Stedman imagined himself a famous archaeologist in a field jacket and a miner's light on his pith helmet and a brush in his hand, whisking away old dust to uncover the prehistoric bones of an unknown species, a rib cage the size of a ship's skull, a skull big enough to sleep in. He got to his feet and went to the truck after soil sample jars. Soon he had them filled and neatly labeled. He brushed himself off and then got in the truck and pulled to the pumps to buy gas, if it hadn't all leaked out. The phone rang. It was his father again with the right answer. A crash, goddammit, a crash of rhinos. Stedman said he'd call him back later. The unleaded pump was slower than Kilpatrick. 4 cents, 6 cents, 8 cents. Stedman thought he'd been staring at the rhinoceros all day. He'd seen such things as a kid on tractor excursions when he and his father stopped for gas. each station as they drove deeper and deeper into the country stranger than the one before. In those days, owners often tried to attract customers with gimmicks: a two-headed pig preserved in a vat of alcohol, an albino rattlesnake that swallowed live possums, and free Choctaw airheads. Kilpatrick's rhino, though, seemed more impressive, stretching past the regular gas pump on one end and the unleaded on the other. It was almost as long as Stedman's truck and nearly its breadth. With the pump running, he approached the rhino and touched its flank. It was gray and dry and rough as the side of a mountain. He brought his fingers to his nose. They smelled musty and leathery, a little oily, like an old saddle. Clumps of stiff hair stuck out of the rhinoceros leg joints and hung from its low-slung belly. Its eyes were marble and sad and bovine, and Stedman imagined it chewing grass in an African field, egrets and wrens across its broad shoulders and back. If a lion or a water buffalo wandered too close, the rhino would toss its great tank of a head, horns slicing through the air like a scimitar. He slid his fingers down the slope of its neck and along its stiff ears, and the bony eye ridges and the snout, the smaller lump-like horn, and the larger, more formidable curved horn. Something rose in Stedman's chest and his fingertips tingled. It felt like he was touching his own past. "My boy done that," Kilpatrick said. He stood in the office door with his hands in his pockets. "Got him a job in a carnival after he tore up his knee playing ball. That rhino died, and him and some of his friends, clowns and midgets and shit, they tied it on a trailer and stole it before anybody could burn it or whatever the hell you do with a dead rhino." Kilpatrick chuckled. "That crazy boy skinned it and mounted it. He weren't too smart, but he was a swift running back and hell on wheels in taxidermy." Stedman pressed his shoulder against the rhinoceros's flank. He could barely move it. It had small, delicate legs, and its feet, except for the one lifted, were nailed to wooden planks with inlets for a forklift. "What does he weigh?" Stedman asked. "She," the old man said, joining him. 350, I reckon. My boy was a strong one. He could lift half of anything." Stedman whistled. A wolf spider had laced a web between the rhino's horns. He flicked the spider off and pulled away the web. "Would you sell her?" he asked. Kilpatrick snorted. "Reckon I'm fixing to have to sell everything." He wiped his lips with a black rag. "Well, these folks pay a heap for that big horn by itself. Them poachers overseas said if you grind it up with powder, it's like giving a woman a bucket of damn oysters." "What if," Stedman said, "I could let you keep your station?" Kilpatrick regarded him. "I could rig something," Stedman said. "You gotta have a leak detection. That's all there is to it. If you don't, we'll both get caught." He studied the ground at his feet. Dirt he knew deep down was contaminated. You couldn't guess what might happen below the topsoil when you mix things up. He'd worked one project where several tons of buried insecticide waste had been accidentally discovered by a backhoe. The sludge had eaten through the metal barrels it had been stored in and mixed with each other and the minerals in the soil, and they formed a strange new chemical combination. The unlucky backhoe driver had died instantly from the murky green cloud that belched out of the ground. Stedman walked into the road, hazy with heat as far as he could see. And for a moment, he thought a truck was coming, an 18-wheeler, but it was only a mirage. Shading his eyes, dizzy with heat, he barely heard the gas pump click off. "I guess you were right the first time," he told Kilpatrick. On the clean side of the station where the tanks weren't buried, Stedman placed a fake pipe he'd pulled out of the ground. He used a sledgehammer to drive it deep, then tamped the dirt tight with the handle. He resumed with the auger and began digging the first of 4 holes around the fake porch. In the widening strip of shade, Kilpatrick watched and drank beer and smoked and crossed and uncrossed his legs. His shirt off, Stedman augured into the night. At about 6 feet down, groundwater started seeping into the holes. He saw it with his flashlight, clear, uncontaminated. The goods. He kept digging. Kilpatrick rose once and limped toward him and handed him a beer. The old man turned and walked several feet away and took a leak while Stedman drank. Then he came back for the empty bottle and returned to his chair. In the distance, a coyote began to howl, and Kilpatrick yelled, "Shut up!" and the howling stopped. Stedman finished digging just after 9:30 in the bright moonlight. A car had passed a few minutes earlier, and only now did he comprehend it. It had slowed, and a black face peered out the open passenger window, and a black hand had waved. Had Stedman waved back? At his truck, he slid 4 8-foot-long PVC pipes from the side rack. Kilpatrick, who'd been napping, woke and said, "What are you up to now?" "These are your monitoring wells," Stedman grunted, twisting the pipe into the first hole. "The way they work is, when I stick 'em in the ground, they fill up with water. And if the water's contaminated, like it probably is on the other side, it'd have an oily sheen on the top. But over here, you shine your flashlight in there, you'll just see clean water. And if the EPA comes to check on you, these ones will be clear." Stedman forced the last pipe in the ground until all but 8 inches showed. "There," he said, screwing on the cap. "Now tomorrow I'll come pour cement around here so nobody will be inclined to check your authenticity." Kilpatrick's camel glowed. A strange sound came from the darkness. It was a fart, maybe, or a grunt of approval. "One more thing," Stedman said, disassembling the auger. "Tomorrow, that rhino comes with me." "I'll clean her up tonight," Kilpatrick said. "You can borrow my trailer." After a moment, the two men shook hands. The next morning at the office, Stedman FedExed jars of soil from his yard to the lab in Savannah. The results would be back in a week. He popped his head into his secretary's office and told her that Kilpatrick Sinclair's station had been a bust, that the old man already had a leak detection. Then he told her it was his father's birthday, and he was taking the day off. Ignoring her raised eyebrows, Stedman walked down the hall and went outside to his truck, and with 8 bags of quick-dry cement, he drove to Kilpatrick's. The old man sat smoking in his office beside an open Coke machine. The unleaded gas pump still showed the $18 Stedman had bought yesterday. Kilpatrick jerked his thumb toward the back of the station. The rhinoceros stood on the trailer, held tight by chains and come-alongs. Kilpatrick walked out from under the shed, hands in his pockets. He directed Stedman in backing the truck to the trailer. The rhino's skin was clean, its eyes polished. It smelled of Lysol, and it looked ready to stomp those feet and break loose from the puny chains and come-alongs and charge. "What you say?" Kilpatrick said. Stedman paused, a bag of cement on each shoulder. "It's cooler today." The old man squinted at the sky. "Yeah, might rain." "Might," said Stedman. Stedman poured cement around the wells, adding water from a leaky garden hose while Kilpatrick hitched the trailer, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Now and again he coughed. When he'd finished, Stedman walked to the trailer. Kilpatrick was wiring the trailer lights. "How come your son gave you that rhino?" Stedman asked. Kilpatrick didn't look up. "I don't remember," he said. Together, they threw a tarp across the rhinoceros and then stepped back to inspect the job. It seemed illegal, transporting something so large and so threatening. But that worry was soon shrinking in Stedman's mirror as the truck kicked up dust enough to blot out Kilpatrick from sight. A hell of a lot bigger than a shoebox, Stedman thought, picturing the rhino beside the azaleas, surrounded by old people at the nursing home, his father among them, touching and stroking the dangerous beast with lust in their fingertips, a birthday gift ancient, faithful, and unforgettable. Birds would collect on the rhino's back, and Stedman knew his father would impress everyone by identifying the birds. As he drove away from Kilpatrick's, Stedman pretended the rhino chased him, and like a child running at night, he went faster and faster. But the rhinoceros stayed close behind, its eyes tiny and clear and its nose low and its horn inches away from Stedman's gas tank.